At 6:47 local time, two U.S. Navy destroyers cut through the Strait of Hormuz. In full daylight, in full tracking view of satellites, commercial aircraft, and every Coast Guard station on both shores, they moved east to west through the 21-mile choke point that carries 20% of the world's traded oil. This happened 11 days after Iran announced it had seeded that same waterway with underwater mines. 11 days after a deputy foreign minister warned the strait would remain open only through coordination with Iranian military contact points. 11 days after the world was told that any ship entering without permission would be targeted. At the wheel of the lead destroyer, a radar operator watched clean screens, nomad alerts, no active harbor pings, no distributed sonar contacts, no pattern matching anything on the threat database. The strait was empty where it should have been armed. 4 hours later, both ships exited eastward the way they came in. No confrontation, no missile launches, no radio threats demanding they reverse course. They simply continued their route and disappeared over the horizon. Something has changed in the Persian Gulf. What changed is the story Iran has been telling the world about its control over the waterway that matters most. And the timing could not be more precise. Before we dive in, comment where you are watching from and click subscribe. Now, to understand why this moment matters, you need to know what the Strait of Hormuz represents in purely physical terms. At its narrowest, the shipping channel is just 21 nautical miles wide. At its deepest, we get is 220 feet. Every day, roughly 9 million barrels of crude oil pass through those dimensions, moved by supertankers so large their keels cannot turn in any radius tighter than a half mile. This is not a metaphor. This is plumbing at the scale of the global economy, where one barrel equals roughly $70 at today's price. 9 million barrels a day crossing a channel you can walk across if you were foolish enough to try. The consequences of closure are not theoretical. In 2022, when the prospect of Iranian obstruction briefly circulated, the price of Brent crude spiked $11 in a single afternoon. $11 times 9 million barrels times every tanker that did not move equals a figure large enough to rewrite the budgets of nations. That is what Iran has been dangling as leverage. And that is what is now being tested. The unfolding of this event follows a specific chain of decisions and capabilities, and each link matters. 3 weeks before the transit, Iranian military officials announced they had deployed mines in the Strait of Hormuz. The statement was explicit. It named the type as bottom-laid, bottom-moored, and weight-activated. It described the densities. It explained that wartime conditions had created, in their words, technical limitations to navigation that would require coordination with Iranian military contact points before any vessel could pass safely. That statement serves as the baseline for everything that follows. 2 days before the transit, in an interview dated April 9th, an Iranian deputy foreign minister clarified the position further. He stated that the strait remained open, but that coordination was mandatory. He described the narrowness and sensitivity of the waterway. He emphasized that special caution was necessary to protect vessels and tankers from what he termed wartime conditions. He implied that Iran possessed knowledge of mine placements and that ships must follow specific procedures. That was the public claim, a claim about knowledge. Within 48 hours of that interview, 2 U.S. warships moved through without asking for permission, without coordinating with any Iranian contact point, and without incident. The difference between those two facts is the story. Let us look at the physical details because they are what make this real. The lead ship was identified by independent tracking as a Flight 1 Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. She draws 32 feet of water, displaces 8,000 tons, and can sustain 30 knots flat out. The transit speed was 11 knots, which is slow for a ship of that class. At 11 knots, she covers 202 meters per minute. At that speed, crossing the Narrows at the Gulf of Oman's side takes roughly 53 minutes. The second ship followed 2 nautical miles astern. Close formation for a straight transit. At that distance, the lead ship's wake becomes the following ship's sea state, reducing roll by nearly a third. Someone planned that transit with precision. At no point did either ship's electronic warfare suite register a radar ping from an Iranian shore battery. At no point did an Iranian fast boat interdict. At no point did a helicopter launch from the port of Bandar Abbas. At no point did the radio crackle with the warning that Iranian naval doctrine required. Nothing. Independent verification exists. Satellite tracking data from 3 separate providers confirms the exact route. 2 American publications confirm passage through the Narrows from east to west, return through the same corridor. 1 Iranian state-aligned outlet claimed the ship's attempted entry, but turned back after warnings. That same outlet has been accused of spreading inaccurate information on 7 separate occasions in the past 6 weeks, according to independent fact review organizations. The contradiction matters because credibility is the currency Iran has been spending. If the story about mines works, even when the mines cannot be confirmed to exist or cannot be located even by the people who place them, then the psychological pressure alone may accomplish what physical explosives cannot. A mine that might be there is functionally identical to a mine that is there when you are the captain of a $400,000 per day supertanker, calculating whether to risk your vessel and your crew. There is a second theory, and it is worth stating plainly because it explains the silence. Some analysts believe Iran may never have physically deployed the mines at all, that the entire announcement was informational warfare designed to create uncertainty in the minds of insurance underwriters, vessel masters, and port authorities. Uncertainty is a weapon. It does not require hardware. It requires only the belief that the hardware might exist. If ships choose not to enter because they are afraid, the result is identical to a blockade enforced by mines. Ship owners do not test warranties with their cargo. They reroute, they wait, they renegotiate. The strait functions as a bottleneck precisely because it is narrow, and any business person managing risk prefers certainty over savings. That theory has not been confirmed. It remains theory, but it fits the observed behavior. U.S. leadership has offered a different version of events. Former President Donald Trump stated publicly that Iran's primary leverage in the region comes from the perceived threat of naval mines. He claimed that much of Iran's mine-laying capability had been neutralized or destroyed in prior operations. He framed the current effort as a service not only to the United States but to global trading partners: China, Japan, South Korea, France, Germany, and others. He stated that the Strait of Hormuz is now being secured for international shipping. Whether that is accurate or promotional depends on which assets have been deployed and what has been destroyed. Information that has not been made public. These statements are not independently verified. They are not contradicted. They exist in a middle space, simultaneous to the maritime transit. Diplomatic talks opened in Islamabad. The location is significant. Pakistan borders Iran and maintains a complex relationship with both Washington and Tehran, providing neutral ground with intelligence, sharing infrastructure already in place. The timeline places an Iranian delegation arriving in Pakistan 23 minutes before the U.S. diplomatic team landed at the same airport. The sequence matters. The Iranians were waiting. The Americans were arriving. Either Iran wanted the meeting more than the posture suggested, or Iran wanted to control the optics of who arrived first. Both are rational. Neither is confirmed. The composition of the Iranian delegation numbers approximately 70 individuals: economic specialists, diplomatic advisors, security analysts, and individuals with assessed connections to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The presence of military specialists at a diplomatic negotiation table is not unusual. It is expected when the subject includes sanctions relief, assets freeze, and security guarantees. What is notable is the ratio. 3 out of every 10 members have backgrounds in finance or economics. The remaining 7 include security policy experts and regional analysts. This suggests a multi-track approach. Economic relief is the priority. What security architecture is the mechanism? Iran came prepared to discuss numbers, not just positions. The stated preconditions for these talks are instructive. Before the talks, Iranian officials had demanded two conditions: a ceasefire agreement in Lebanon involving Israel, and the release of frozen Iranian financial assets held in foreign jurisdictions. Both have been stated publicly. Both remain unfulfilled as of this recording. There is no confirmed ceasefire in Lebanon. Hostilities continue. There is no announced release of frozen Iranian funds. U.S. officials have stated directly that no agreement to release those assets was made. Yet the talks proceeded. This is the first piece of evidence that Iran may be treating the negotiation as something other than a binary demand and response. They showed up without the conditions they set. That is either a strategic capitulation or a tactical repositioning, and the difference matters enormously. The talks began behind closed doors at 14:30 local time and continued for 6 hours. 6 hours is a long meeting. In diplomatic terms, duration is a proxy for seriousness. Briefings take minutes. Ultimatums take seconds. 6 hours suggests substantive engagement with drafting language, with proposed alternatives, with iterative positioning. Either the two sides were building something or they were creating the appearance of building something while their military deployments continued elsewhere. Both are possible. Neither is confirmed. Now, the warships themselves, the key question is whether they had specialized mine-clearing capability. The publicly available class documentation suggests the Arleigh Burke design prioritizes anti-air and anti-surface warfare over mine countermeasures. There is no public indication that either vessel was equipped with organic mine hunting or mine-sweeping systems. This creates a puzzle. If the stated threat was mines, and the ships lacked dedicated countermeasure capability, someone made a risk calculation. Either the threat was assessed as not real, or the risk was accepted as manageable, or the mission was designed with assets that have not been publicly disclosed. Each explanation produces a different truth about what Iran either has or does not have, and what the United States either knows or believes. The simplest explanation is also the most unsettling. The ships moved because the waterway was safe to move through, and the waterway was safe because the mines either do not exist in the numbers claimed or they exist in a state that cannot be activated. Either case collapses the leverage. A parallel development adds complexity. Intelligence assessments suggest that China is preparing to supply Iran with new air defense systems, including man-pads, man-portable air defense systems. These are shoulder-fired weapons, effective against low-flying aircraft up to 15,000 feet. Man-pads have been decisive in previous conflicts where air superiority was assumed. An army advancing under the assumption of uncontested air cover has learned that assumption is expensive. These systems change the calculus of any future ground operation if the ceasefire arrangement fails. They represent a qualitative shift in Iranian defensive capability, and their introduction timeline correlates precisely with the diplomatic talks now concluding. The offer and the negotiation may be related, they may be unrelated, the timing is coincidental or deliberate. Resolution: the two facts that bookend this story are these. 11 days ago, Iran said the Strait of Hormuz was a mined war zone requiring coordination. 11 days later, 2 U.S. warships crossed that waterway without asking, and nothing happened. Nothing is the data point. Nothing is what the world watched. Nothing is what the insurance underwriters will file. Nothing is what the supertanker captains will plot on their next voyage. Nothing. In a waterway where something was supposed to be changes everything. One image, one number, one fact. 11 days between the warning and the test. The weight of that number tells you whether the bluff was called or whether it was never the kind of hand that could be called. The viewer decides, and the strait decides what it will carry tomorrow.